One of the biggest frustrations in a reef tank is air bubbles. More specifically, the air bubbles not so much down in the sump, but the ones that end up in the tank. The little champagne air bubbles floating around the tank. And what happens is things such as the flow coming out of the protein skimmer are ultimately drawn up by the water pump, which in turn beats them up and sends them up into the tank. So we want to try to minimize all the splashing that occurs, and we did a real good job by reducing that with the T on the discharge of the protein skimmer, in particular with the vent. And here, this is something that we can't really decrease, but what we can do is introduce a sponge, or a post-filter sponge, in this series of dividers or weirs, and that should help decrease the amount of air bubbles that make it over to the inlet of the water pump. So the post-filter sponge, again, slips into that series of dividers down there, and what it should do is act as a bit of a deterrent for slowing down some of those champagne bubbles passing through it and getting pulled up by the water pump. In fact, you can see there's already a bit of a decrease there.
Yeah, did it? Yeah.
But again, the protein skimmer at this time is in a temporary position. We're waiting for the little platform that we ordered to come in so that we can place it probably over at this end of the sump somewhere. Additionally, this line here that supplies the water for the protein skimmer will be tidied up and repositioned a little bit better.
This will also give the skimmer some time to break itself in, to build up a slime coat on its inside.
So here is our calcium reactor. The basic idea is what we want to do is pump CO2 gas into a vessel or chamber where there's a calcareous media. That CO2 gas is low in pH, and depending upon how we adjust it, the pH could be as low as 6.0 to 6.4. The idea being that the low pH will cause the calcareous gravel to dissolve. As that dissolved calcareous media works its way through the system, it's introduced over here in the form of a drip rate into the aquarium. And so we have a couple of adjustments to make. One, we want to drop the pH of the water inside the reactor so it begins to dissolve the gravel. And two, we want to measure and monitor the pH of the water coming out of the reactor. And of course, ultimately, what the effect calcium-wise is into the aquarium.
So now that you have an idea as to the installation, the operation, and the basic concept of a calcium reactor, you have to ask the question, how much calcium do I want to add? Or how much calcium do I need to add? As a standard fish-only system, a calcium reactor or regular calcium additions are really not necessary. Regular water changes would help replenish the amount of calcium needed in a fish-only system. In a lightly loaded coral reef tank, the addition of a 2-part calcium solution might be a more convenient approach. It's these heavily loaded coral reef tanks that the corals themselves, such as the Acropora, the staghorn corals, which tend to utilize calcium in their calcium structure and grow quickly, that can use a calcium reactor. Don't get the idea that a calcium reactor is your solution or a more convenient solution, because it too requires regular monitoring and adjustment on a regular basis. That monitoring would be done at 2 different points. One, the use of an electronic pH instrument to measure the pH of the water within inside the calcium reactor. The other, a pH instrument or a pH test kit to measure the pH of the water within the aquarium itself. Additionally, you should be using a calcium test kit as well as an alkalinity test kit. And once again, I invite you to tag along on the future travels of this 100-gallon coral reef tank. It should be an interesting journey, starting next with the introduction of live sand and live rock. And maybe even a show on the aquarium monitor computer system.